Welcome to my channel people. Author link will be on description. Make sure to check it. Tsunade was really worthy of her nickname as the best medical ninja, as she was capable of healing Minato's corpse and allowing it to recover enough to achieve the bare minimum for him to stay alive. Of course, this was only possible because she used Hashirama's cells, otherwise this endeavor would be impossible unless you have a Rinnegan or use a forbidden jutsu that exchange life for life. Still, even though her achievement was truly great, she still kept stressing out that Minato could only hold on for 10 seconds at best while inside this body, from the moment she manipulates his heart to start working to the moment he dies again. And this is where the flaw of the spirit transformation jutsu comes to play, because a characteristic of this jutsu is that if the user possesses someone, and that person's body become fatally injured, the user will die along with the body if he doesn't leave it fast enough, so Minato was at a huge risk of truly dying if Bakurio doesn't act fast. To their surprise, Bakurio suddenly took out a scroll and unsealed its content, revealing two pairs of eyes. One was a normal pair of eyes while the other was a pair of blood-red eyes, and each one of them was stored inside a cylinder-shaped container that contained some kind of fluid. Then, he directly threw the pair of normal eyes to Tsunade and said, "Please transplant these to Minato's body." Tsunade didn't mind this at all, but she had a weird question that she kept holding inside her heart the moment she heard him demand the pair of eyes from Fugaku. What about the pair of Sharingans? Are you finally going to tell us what you intend to do with them? Minato, Kushina, and Shizune were also curious about this, but the answer was simply beyond their wildest imagination. "I'm going to transplant them to myself." Minato felt like a bomb exploding through his head, seeing how far Bakurio was trying to go to help him, so he quickly said, "I refuse. We should try to find another way." Minato didn't want to cause another person so much pain just for his own selfishness, which is why Bakurio didn't mind experiencing the pain of gouging his own eyes for him and didn't tell them what he was intending to do from the start. "I agree with Minato. You really shouldn't do this, Bakurio-kun. I'm sure we could find another solution," said Kushina with a worried look on her face. Despite their worries, Bakurio's face was very calm when he replied to them, "Maybe we can. But I don't want to waste so much time searching for one. Plus most of the ones I know requires human sacrifices to revive people, and I don't think you would like those, do you?" Kushina and Minato didn't know what to say, and Tsunade soon after said, "I agree with Bakurio. As you can see, even my grandpa's cells can only recover so much, so this isn't time for hesitation. Minato struggled a little inside before he let out a long sigh and said, "I won't forget this favor." As for Kushina, her eyes started watering a little. Bakurio simply had a small smile on his face as he nodded at Minato before he turned to Tsunade's assistant Shizune and said, "Shizune, can you please help with this while Tsunade transplant those eyes to the corpses?" Shizune, knowing her teacher's trouble with blood, knew that this responsibility was going to fall on her hands sooner or later, but she didn't expect that the kid would trust someone unknown such as her with this kind of task. Did he know about Lady Tsunade's illness? Shizune's couldn't help but suspect this, and Tsunade had similar thoughts, but she decided not to speak on them for now as she heard her apprentice ask, "Bakurio-kun, aren't you afraid I might not be good enough?" Shizune really didn't understand how this kid could trust people so easily. "If you weren't good enough, you wouldn't be her apprentice. I'm sure Tsunade taught you well." Shizune and Tsunade were surprised by how sure of himself Bakurio seemed about what he was saying, and they couldn't help but feel delighted by it as a student and teacher. "Okay then, let's go." Shizune was pumped up for this, seeing someone trust her medical skills like this, and seeing her enthusiasm Bakurio couldn't help but say, "What are you excited about? Someone is about to gouge his eyes here." Hearing this, Shizune felt very embarrassed and approached him while trying to avoid looking at him, but then Bakurio took out another container and looked at her seriously before he said, "You can place my eyes inside of these containers and be extra careful when you handle them, okay?" Hearing the severe tone he was using, Shizune couldn't help but swallow her saliva when she saw this as she took the empty containers from him. Then she was also handed the containers that contained the normal Sharingan and found herself standing there like a table. "Did you call me here to hold these?" Shizune was about to protest, but out of nowhere the boy in front of her put his hand on his left eyeball and then he removed it, leaving a hollow eye socket dripping with blood, appearing like a scene from a nightmare as he let out a grunt of pain. Meanwhile, as Bakurio was enjoying his trip to Pain Land, On the Uchiha compound, a father and his son were staring at each other silently before Fugaku opened his mouth and said, "Tell me everything that happened and how you awakened your eyes," and Itachi nodded calmly and started telling him how he thought Sasuke was dead and his rage and despair caused his eyes to awaken. Fugaku gritted his teeth as he said, "Damn that bastard Bakurio, wait until he lands on my hands." But then Fugaku smiled proudly, "You really are my son, you didn't disappoint me and actually awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan of our clan. I will take you later to the Naka shrine to show you the history of our clan. Maybe your eyes will read better than mine." Itachi was surprised at first, but he was smart enough to realize as he said, "You mean, father, you awakened your Mangekyo Sharingan too?" Fugaku's eyes started slowly swirling and turned into his Mangekyo Sharingan before he said, "Yes, during the war, but I kept it hidden because of the situation of the clan. Anyways, I will teach you how to use your eyes. Follow me," and Itachi's secret training started and the mentorship of his father, something that didn't happen before. Back the Senju compound, Shizune stood there with her mouth gaping, and not only her, other than Tsunade, who turned away not wanting to see the gruesome sight of blood. Minato and Kushina were equally astounded as they stared at Bakurio's pained face. "Stop standing there like an idiot and open the container for me." Bakurio was capable of barely saying this through his gritted teeth, waking everyone out of their trance as Shizune quickly opened the container and handed it to him. As for Minato, he started gritting his teeth so hard and was so agitated to the point that he almost lost control of the spirit transformation jutsu, and Kushina wasn't doing any better as she covered her mouth with her hands while staring at this scene. But the horror show wasn't over, because once Bakurio was done with storing his left eye safely, he immediately took out his right eye and also stored it in a container before he said to Shizune, "Okay, careful, don't mix them, and now the rest is up to you." Shizune nodded seriously even though she knows he couldn't see her before she stored Bakurio's eyes in a scroll he handed to her and started transplanting Yashiro's eyes to him. Surprisingly, this didn't take long because she found that even without using her medical ninjutsu to heal the replaced eyes, Bakurio's body seemed full of vitality and instantly started healing when the eyes were transplanted. Bakurio slowly opened his eyes, feeling that his vision wasn't the same as it used to, probably because his eyes were far superior to normal thanks to all the enhancement from the system he's been through. "Are you done, Tsunade?" asked Bakurio about the pair of eyes he gave her, which in fact came from Danzo's lab, and apparently he had plenty of human eyes. What a freak. "Yes, what about you? Are you feeling fine?" asked Tsunade in concern that whatever I was going to do might end up failing. "Don't worry, everything feels right," replied Bakurio before he turned to Minato, who seemed to be in a struggle with himself, and said, "It's already too late to go back now, Minato, just go with it and don't worry about it." Minato nodded at me before he transformed into a beam of light and quickly entered his body, and the moment he opened his eyes, he was met with two bloody red eyes and was instantly caught in a trance. Then, to the shock of everyone watching, Bakurio suddenly lifted his hand and started blowing air on it, which turned into a small sword made of wind. That's when Tsunade finally realized that something wasn't right and yelled, "Stop!" But it was too late, and before she could move, Bakurio slashed the sword in a swift movement and decapitated Minato's head. "No!" yelled Tsunade before she suddenly appeared in front of Bakurio and immediately sent a deadly kick at him. She held herself back a little, but that kick was enough to cripple most Chunin. Meanwhile, Bakurio suddenly felt the danger and couldn't help but open his eyes and looked in Tsunade's direction instinctively. That's when she noticed that both of his eyes were white, clearly a sign that he was completely blind. "What's going on?" thought Tsunade as she tried to lower the power behind her kick even more, feeling that this situation had more to it than what was apparent. The scene of Minato getting decapitated was too gruesome for Tsunade, especially since she didn't witness how Danzo used Izanagi, but she wasn't an idiot, and once she saw how blind Bakurio was, she immediately put the pieces together in her mind. But her kick was still devastating for any kid his age. "Please dodge," prayed Tsunade in her heart, and to her surprise, her prayer was answered as the blind boy in front of her suddenly leaned his body to the side and avoided her kick. At this exchange, Kushina and Tsunade both noticed something. Bakurio's hand that was holding the wind sword instinctively moved to slash Tsunade, but he suddenly stopped himself from doing so, making them surprised at the battle instincts he has. Facing each other, Tsunade immediately asked the question that everyone wanted the answer to, "What's going on, kid?" You better have an explanation for your actions. Bakurio's calm face didn't change at all as suddenly a silhouette started appearing out of thin air in front of everyone before it materialized into a handsome man with blonde spiky hair and blue eyes. He was wearing the standard Konoha uniform with 2 bands on both of his sleeves, a green flak jacket, blue forehead protector, and blue sandals, and over it he was wearing a short-sleeved long white haori closed in the front by a thin, orange rope. The haori was decorated by red flame-like motifs on the edges, and the kanji for 4th Hokage was written vertically on the back. Seeing this familiar man appearing out of nowhere made Tsunade emotional. Am I going crazy? She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Minato shot her a warm smile as he said, "No, you aren't, Lady Tsunade. Thank you, Bakurio-kun," he said as bowed deeply in gratitude. Bakurio nodded in his direction with a smile as he closed his blind eyes again and asked, "How does your body feel?" Minato started checking the condition of his body for a while before he replied, "Perfect. This is the same body I had when I fought Kurama." "That's good to hear. It seems this somehow worked out." Cough cough. Bakurio suddenly started coughing with a pale face. This was the side effect of using Izanagi and Izanami at the same time. A huge amount of Bakurio's chakra was consumed in a short amount of time, leaving him feeling drained. Feeling the condition of his body, Bakurio couldn't help but remember when he suddenly got this idea of using these 2 forbidden jutsu at the same time, and he was inspired after he read the in-depth research Danzo did on Izanagi and coupled it with his knowledge from the anime. According to Itachi, Izanagi is the power to change destiny while Izanami is the power to decide it. And after trying to reconstruct all the knowledge he could still remember about the anime, Bakurio suddenly remembered a scene that happened after Sasuke's final fight with Itachi. At that time Sasuke was heavily injured and Obito took him in and healed him. However, at that moment, when Obito approached Sasuke and tried to remove his mask and show his face to Sasuke, Sasuke's left eye suddenly transformed into Itachi's Mangekyo Sharingan and Amaterasu activated automatically to attack Obito, catching him off guard and forcing him to use his Mangekyo ability to get rid of Amaterasu. So, how did Itachi manage to do such a thing? Well, Bakurio believes that it was a combination of both Izanagi and Izanami. Izanagi is a jutsu similar to his save and load ability because once activated, it allows the user to create something like a checkpoint that records the current condition of the user's body when the Izanagi was activated. So, if the user was injured when he activated his Izanagi, it won't help him to heal that injury. But then comes Izanami, and its power to decide destiny. Izanami allows the user to create a copy of reality and trap someone into it in the form of a genjutsu that keep looping, and the only way to escape it is if the person trapped find the intention behind why he was sealed, which is tricky. So, Bakurio came to the conclusion that Itachi probably used Izanami to create a new copy of reality, which is for Sasuke to activate Amaterasu through his Mangekyo Sharingan, and then he used Izanagi to overlay that copy over reality itself, ending in that spectacular scene. And now, Bakurio did the same thing as he asked Minato beforehand for his permission to check his memory and see his figure when he was at his strongest, and then used Izanami to make a copy of that figure and used it as the save point for Izanagi. And just like that, Minato was back at full strength. However, it was unfortunate that this ability couldn't be used to make Minato stronger, as it was restricted to copying a moment in time that already existed. Seeing how Bakurio was coughing and seemed to be drained of all his chakra, Minato suddenly rushed to his side and asked, "Is everything okay?" Bakurio nodded at him and said, "Yes, I'm fine. Can you transfer some of your chakra to me?" Minato didn't feel convinced as he said with a worried look on his face that was shared with the rest of the people watching, "I can, but are you sure you are feeling okay?" "Yes, don't worry, Minato. It's just a side effect of using too much chakra all at once." Bakurio couldn't help but check out his system, and he noticed that he actually used up a total of 15,000 points of chakra. This was only possible thanks to his increased spirit attributed to all his experience during the war. Minato, seeing that Bakurio was really fine, he started transferring his chakra to him, and Tsunade soon after approached them and asked him directly with her face full of curiosity, something her apprentice shared too, but Bakurio was blind so he couldn't see it, but he somehow felt it even though he didn't have his eyes, which made him surprised. "Bakurio-kun, how did you achieve such a miracle?" Bakurio, hearing her question, thought about it for a second before he suddenly remembered in his past timeline how she kept refusing to teach him her strength of 100 seal jutsu and how smugly she kept saying that she would never teach it to him, so he thought wickedly, finally I got something you want so desperately, huh? But outside he smiled gently as he said, sure, let's make a transaction. Tsunade, seeing this smile, reminded her of those tricky merchants, so she immediately put her guard up and said, what do you want? Bakurio pretended to put on a thoughtful look on his face before he said, your strength of 100 seal in exchange for arguably the best medical ninjutsu ever, what do you say? Tsunade was about to refuse as that jutsu was her legacy and she only wanted to teach it to those she finds truly worthy, but on the other hand, she desperately wanted to know that weird jutsu. Seeing her stuck in a dilemma, Bakurio simply said, well, take your time, my chakra is recovered, so it's time to heal Kushina. Let's go, Shizune. Poor Bakurio was going to have another painful experience with eyes that would make him vow to never go crazy and mistreat his body like that snake Orochimaru or Danzo, but the future holds other plans for him. Thanks to the help of Minato in recovering his chakra reserves, Bakurio was ready to transplant a new pair of Sharingans with the help of Shizune to begin Kushina's revival. However, he couldn't help but be surprised how easily Minato was able to transfer his chakra to him without seeming to be feeling that big of a strain. Meanwhile, he on the other hand almost fainted after exhausting all of that chakra, so it works to show just how insane Minato's chakra reserves are. How in the hell he has all that chakra reserves? Bakurio's thoughts started swirling and he couldn't help but start thinking that the Namikaze family might also be direct descendants of the Sage of the Six Paths, or at least, one of Minato's parents is. While Shizune transplanted his new pair of eyes and he experienced another wave of intense pain which he could barely tolerate thanks to what he went through in the war. Bakurio couldn't hold back his curiosity anymore and decided to take a peek at Minato with his appraisal ability, but to his disappointment, he only saw question marks on the panel that appeared, but surprisingly, his rank had another thing attached to it. It said World Boss. Minato is really amazing to actually have such a title, surpassing most of the people of this world, and I really need to focus on raising my level after this. Thought Bakurio, while Minato for some reason felt a weird sensation washing over his body when Bakurio looked at him this time, and he couldn't help but wonder, am I imagining things? But then he shrugged it off and decided to give Bakurio the benefit of the doubt and simply think of it as him trying to check his condition now that he could see again. Still, that chakra transfer jutsu is really a thing of beauty. Maybe if I learn it I could solve my problem with the system's battery. Reaching this point, Bakurio decided that he would make sure to do anything in his power to learn that jutsu from Minato in the near future. After he was done with his thoughts, Bakurio turned to Kushina and signaled to her that he was ready, and she simply nodded at him before she shared a look with the now revived Minato and immediately entered her old corpse that now had a new pair of eyes that Tsunade transplanted. After going through the same experience as Minato, and again seeing the shocking scene of her head going flying before suddenly disappearing and reappearing again as a completely recovered body, it didn't stop Tsunade and Shizune from finding themselves speechless, and the former couldn't help but think, should I really exchange jutsus with him? Meanwhile, Minato was observing Kushina's completely revived body in front of him with an absent-minded look as she checked her body for any problems, and she couldn't help but find herself feeling like she was dreaming. We actually got another chance to be with Naruto, muttered Kushina as she looked at the boy sleeping peacefully to the side and tears started streaming down from her eyes. Then she noticed Minato carry little Naruto up and approach her with a gentle smile on his face, making her tears flow even harder as she quickly rushed and hugged them both. The scene she dreamt of was finally happening for real, and she couldn't believe it. I won't ever let you and Naruto down again, I promise, said Minato as he hugged his wife, and she found comfort in his words as she understood that they were his first priority this time. Meanwhile, as this touching reunion was happening, Tsunade was looking at it with an envious and somewhat tragic look in her eyes as she thought about her lover Dan and wished to be in their place right now, so she couldn't help but look at the kid that could make all of this happen. As for Shizune, she was shedding rivers of tears at this touching scene. Woo, I'm so glad they are back together. But before she could keep watching the drama, she was suddenly hit on the back of the head. What are you doing? Yelled Shizune at the kid, who interrupted her from enjoying this touching scene, but the kid simply opened his eyes, showing her that he was blind, and said, you still have work to do, so stop slacking off. Shizune, recalling what this kid went through so that the touching scene in front of her could be realized, looked at him with an embarrassed look and couldn't help but regret her earlier outburst, so she nodded like a good girl and went with him to the side to transplant his original eyes back to him. Okay, let's begin, muttered Bakurio before he in one fell swoop removed both of his eyes, now in a more practiced manner, and Shizune quickly transplanted his old eyes back to him and started healing him so that he would recover quickly, and before long Bakurio opened his eyes again and finally found that his perfect vision was back to normal as he observed his surrounding and checked if everything was okay before he turned his attention to Minato and Kushina, who were approaching him with grateful looks on their faces. Bakurio-kun, I can't express how thankful I'm for this new life you granted us to be with our son, said Minato with a completely touched look on his face. As for Kushina, she simply shot me a pained look when she saw the traces of blood around my eyes and quickly rushed at me and gave me a strong hug as she kept thanking me while tears kept streaming down her eyes. Thank you so much. You can't imagine how much this means for a mother like me that kept looking at her son every day living on his own without having any power to help him and take care of him. Meanwhile, Bakurio, seeing these two act like this, couldn't help but smile warmly at them and thought that his little sacrifice was worth it as he patted Kushina on the head and said, "It's okay now, don't cry, you've got a new chance, so make the best of what you can with it." Kushina nodded as her heart exploded with happiness at what the future held for her and her family, and seeing his wife like that, Minato knelt beside her and he too started comforting her before he said to Bakurio, "At first I never thought you would actually find a way to revive us without a huge sacrifice, but we were both ready to help you in any way we could if you kept your promise to take care of Naruto in our place, but right now, things are different." Bakurio raised his head at Minato, and even Shizune and Tsunade couldn't help but listen to this conversation in intrigue. So this kid used Naruto to gain Minato's and Kushina's trust, huh? What's Minato going to do now that he doesn't need this kid? Minato suddenly put on a serious look on his face as he said, "I know I promised Kushina that I won't let her and Naruto down again, but that promise wasn't meant just for them. It also concerned you, Bakurio-kun, and no matter what trouble you find yourself in the future, I will always be there for you, even if it costs my life, and I think Kushina wouldn't mind it, right?" Hearing what Minato said, Kushina shook her head and said, "No, I will also be there for Bakurio-kun no matter what." Hearing what they said, Bakurio suddenly lowered his head, letting his face be covered by his hair as he muttered, "Thank you." Only he knows how touched he was by those words. Seeing the reunion of parents with their children is always moving, and this is the scene Tsunade, Shizune, and Bakurio were currently witnessing unfolding in front of their eyes as Naruto, who just woke up, couldn't believe that his parents were standing in front of him and he won't have to be restricted to simply seeing them in that damp seal space, but he can actually live with them all together. Meanwhile, as that family was having their happy moment which they truly deserved and Shizune was watching them with twinkling eyes, Bakurio noticed that Tsunade appeared to be in a very sad mood, but she kept trying to cover it and put on a smile on her face. But emotions cannot hide from Bakurio's eyes, so he approached her and said, "Let's go talk about our deal." Tsunade, still trying to hide her emotions, simply nodded to Bakurio and turned to Shizune and said, "Wait for us here, we will be back soon." After she said this, she turned to Bakurio thinking that he was simply after her jutsu and gestured for him to follow her coldly as she led him to another room in her house. While Bakurio was following behind her, he couldn't help but admire how great this house was, truly deserving of the Senju clan, and before long they arrived at a room that was filled with old books and had a single desk inside it, which he guessed was the room Tsunade uses to study. Before they even entered this room, Bakurio was immediately assaulted by the scent of old books, which made him feel nostalgic as he recalled his old study, which he called his little heaven. After they entered the study, Tsunade closed the door behind them and they both sat down facing each other, separated by the desk, and only now did Bakurio speak, and his question brought waves to Tsunade's heart as it was unexpected. "Do you want to talk about it?" Tsunade, not believing that this kid could actually see through her mask, decided to play it dumb and asked, "Talk about what?" Bakurio understood that it wasn't easy for this woman to open up to anybody, especially someone she didn't know much about like him, so he went straight to the point and said to her, "I know you were feeling sad from the moment you witnessed Minato and Kushina using the spirit transformation jutsu, and that feeling simply grew stronger when you saw their successful revival and the happiness they felt for getting a new chance in life." Tsunade suddenly stood and took a step back. As she looked at the kid in front of her in astonishment. If it was only him seeing through her emotions, she wouldn't be this surprised, but this kid was doing all of this while occupied with a very important task, and sometimes he was completely blind, yet he actually still spared some time to observe her, which made her understand that he never let his guard for an instant, which terrified her. How did you know all of this? Asked Tsunade while trying to calm herself down as much as possible. Oh, that was actually thanks to Kushina. Bakurio said this lie is a matter of fact, and even Tsunade couldn't see any falsehood on his face. Kushina asked Tsunade as she regained her calm and sat down again. Yes, Kushina. When I gave them the spirit transformation jutsu, she told me that this used to be the signature jutsu of a man named Dan Kato, and she said that he used to be your lover. So seeing you act like that, I easily connected the two. Bakurio had a sympathetic look on his face, and for the first time, it wasn't something he was faking, because he really pitied this woman that lost everything dear to her in her life. Hearing what Bakurio said and understanding that he knew what he was talking about and wasn't simply bluffing, Tsunade finally allowed for her true emotions to appear as her face became covered with sadness. You are correct. I know I shouldn't be, but I was actually envious of Minato and Kushina when I saw how they came back to life, and I wished I could experience that type of happiness too and see my loved ones come back. Bakurio put on a thoughtful expression before he said out of nowhere, "Can you promise me something?" Tsunade reined in her sad expression before she responded to this kid, "What do you want? Or are you trying to make me emotional, believing that it might help your negotiations for the strength of 1,000 seal jutsu?" Tsunade thought this is what the kid was after and felt stupid that she actually opened up a little to him, but she couldn't help but widen her eyes as she saw him shook his head and say with a genuine look, "I know you don't have many attachments left to Konoha, and I understand why. That's why I hope you can promise me that if something ever happens to me, please take care of Makoto and the children in my absence." Of course, now Minato is alive, so this is only when he's also occupied. Tsunade was truly shocked at the weird request this kid suddenly came up with, but she suddenly had an idea and said, "Are you willing to exchange this favor for the jutsu you used to revive Minato and Kushina?" Bakurio's eyes flashed a little bit before he replied, "Their lives can't be compared to any jutsu, but yes, I don't mind going with this exchange." He actually accepted. Is he really willing to give up his desire for my legacy just for the sake of his Frian? When Tsunade's thoughts reached this point, she suddenly remembered that this kid had just gone through an unimaginable amount of pain of transplanting several pairs of eyes just for the sake of reviving his friends, and he didn't let a single sound out of his mouth so that he doesn't make them feel guilty about it. It seems I misjudged this kid, thought Tsunade before she let out a sigh and said, "Fine, I can promise you I will take care of your friends in case something happens to you, and as you said, people are priceless, so you don't need to exchange that jutsu for them." Just as she finished speaking, Tsunade witnessed a smile of delight appearing on Bakurio's face and was shocked as he muttered, "Well, you passed the test, Tsunade. It seems it's worth it to invest some effort into helping you. What are you talking about?" asked Tsunade with a frown, not understanding what was going on, and Bakurio replied with the same smile, "I can help you find some closure, but I had to test you first to see if this sacrifice is worth it or not. After all this time I will to use my own eyes." At the end, Bakurio pointed at his pitch black eyes, confusing Tsunade even more. "Test? You mean you were lying when you said you might disappear?" Tsunade was about to get angry at the thought of this little kid toying with her, but she suddenly noticed a sad look on his face that appeared for only an instant before it disappeared again as he said, "No, I didn't lie to you. I would really love if you could help me fulfill that request." Was I imagining things? Thought Tsunade as she recalled that sad and lonely look. No, I'm not. She was convinced that she saw right, but she didn't want to bother him with it as it doesn't seem like something he would talk about, so she asked him about something else he said that intrigued her. "You said you want to bring me closure using your eyes." Bakurio nodded at her, and to the shock of Tsunade, his eyes started to slowly change into his Mangekyo Sharingan before he said, "Yes, these eyes can help you." Tsunade didn't know how many times she was going to be surprised today before she gets used to it, as every time she thinks that she understood the limitations and capabilities of the boy before her, he retrieves something new to shock her with. And now, staring at his eyes that transformed into the unique pattern of the rare Mangekyo Sharingan, she found herself speechless. But this experienced Sannin soon calmed herself down and asked the boy in front of her who kept staring at her silently, "Does Fugaku and Minato know that you awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan?" Bakurio expected this question and he simply shook her head to answer her and said, "You are the only person I revealed this secret to, and I hope it stays this way." Tsunade really didn't know what to say, especially since in this timeline, Fugaku wasn't forced to reveal his Mangekyo Sharingan, and Shisui also wasn't forced to reveal his, so this was her first time hearing about someone possessing them, and Itachi's awakening was kept as top secret. "Why are you worried about suddenly disappearing if you have these eyes?" Tsunade was perplexed at what could worry this kid in front of her who appeared to be so talented, but she couldn't say anything when she heard his answer. Madara Uchiha also had these eyes in addition to the 9 tails under his command, yet your grandfather Hashirama still beat him in the end. So having these eyes means nothing with the lurking powers in this world. Tsunade's eyes suddenly widened, but she ended up agreeing. After all, she suffered plenty of losses in her life, including the one that gained her the title of a Sannin, so she wasn't arrogant at all about her power and knew how to keep her ego in check, and she was glad to hear that such a successful kid was able to do it too. Then she suddenly remembered Bakurio's previous words and couldn't help but ask him in anticipation, "So, what did you mean by saying that your eyes can help me find closure?" Bakurio grew thoughtful a little before he started unleashing a little bit of his aura of death. "These grant me the power to be connected to the realm of the dead." Seeing the ominous aura of death and hearing what he said, Tsunade's heart suddenly started beating rapidly as she said, "You mean?" Bakurio nodded at her and said, "Yes, I can help you connect to your loved ones and talk with them, but that's the limit of my current ability and you will have to be quick." Tsunade felt like her heart was about to leap out from her chest, so she held her hand to her chest and said nervously, almost in a begging tone, "Please help me." Tsunade lost everyone dear to her and she always wished she could see them again. Her grandfather died for some reason not long after his fight with Madara when she was still a little child. Her uncle died soon after him in an ambush from Kumo. Her grandmother died after the 9 tails was extracted from her, and the rest of her family including her little brother Nawaki died in either the second or the third ninja wars until her whole clan was gone, leaving her all alone living a tragic life, a life that only got worse when she lost her lover too. Seeing the state of this legendary character, Bakurio couldn't help but pity her as he said, "Lend me your 2 hands, and I want you to think of the people you want to meet as hard as you can." Tsunade quickly held his tiny hands before she closed her eyes and started thinking about the 2 people she regretted losing the most, her lover Dan and her brother Nawaki. Meanwhile, as Tsunade was focusing on her loved ones, Bakurio on the other hand was focusing all of his power to find these 2 using Yomi no Kuni, and before long, he located them thanks to the help of Tsunade's overwhelming emotions that acted as a beacon to connect to them through his power. This was something he gained after the level of his Yomi no Kuni raised through its continuous use during the war, and thankfully it wasn't as taxing as using the chains of death. After all, instead of dragging something from that realm, he was simply meeting the dead souls halfway right now. After confirming that he located the right souls, Bakurio suddenly opened his eyes and said to Tsunade, "Look into my eyes." Tsunade noticed that his left eye was slightly bloodshot and she understood that it might start bleeding at any moment, but she didn't say anything as she looked at his eyes and found herself in a dark space, and in front of her were 2 people looking around curiously. They were Dan and Nawaki, and she couldn't help but start sobbing uncontrollably as she rushed at them. Meanwhile, on the hall, Minato and Kushina suddenly raised their heads and looked in the direction of the room where Tsunade and Bakurio were having their talk, and they couldn't help but look at each other in worry and think, "What a terrible and ominous aura, is this the doing of Bakurio-kun?" This was the effect of the aura of death Bakurio summoned and was currently revolving around him and Tsunade as it connected them to a space between life and death. Meanwhile, the oblivious Naruto and Shizune were happily talking to Minato and Kushina, who were acting as if everything was fine. This lasted for 5 minutes, and after that, they were approached by Bakurio and Tsunade, whose eyes appeared to be red for some reason as if she was crying. Yet Minato, Kushina, and Shizune could feel something different about her smile which she was using while talking to Bakurio. It seemed much more genuine. Bakurio thought long and hard about if he should expose Minato and Kushina's revival, but in the end, he opted for only telling Fugaku and Shikaku about it and left the four of them the choice if they want to tell someone else about it, like Kakashi or Jiraiya for example. This news shocked those two to their bones, and they couldn't believe that Minato was actually standing in front of them until he showed them his Flying Thunder God Jutsu, removing any doubts they might have had left, and they ended up staring at the kid who achieved all of this in wonder. But then Fugaku suddenly had a realization and asked, "Bakurio, is this why you requested for the 2 pairs of Sharingan?" Bakurio simply shrugged at him as if saying it was obvious, so Minato decided to explain instead and started recounting all the pain Bakurio had to go through in order to help them recover, which left them speechless. Meanwhile, Shikaku felt slightly embarrassed at doubting Bakurio, while Fugaku couldn't feel happier at seeing his old and reliable friend back. After all, when Fugaku found out that he wasn't going to have a chance to become Hokage, he used all of his power and the Uchiha's power to support Minato to become a Hokage, so their relationship was very good. But Bakurio found himself stuck with another issue. Because Minato and Kushina's identity was supposed to be hidden, they ended up living with Bakurio in the Uchiha compound, and he was anything but happy about it. After all, during the past few days, he even dealt with that side character Sora and absorbed the Nine Tails chakra inside of him before he went to Asuma and convinced him to take care of his old friend's kid. But he got rid of one and got 2 instead. Well, at least I won't need to worry about taking care of Naruto all the time. And with this optimistic thought, Bakurio started planning the release of Kurama from his seal with the help of Minato and Kushina. A few days after Minato's and Kushina's revival, Tsunade was still staying in Konoha trying to help Mukai heal his ill son, and after doing some diagnosing, she actually found out that his son's situation was almost helpless, and Bakurio, who has learning medical ninjutsu from her using one of his shadow clones, couldn't help but ask when he saw her deep frown while looking at the emaciated kid that had some resemblance to Mukai and was clearly in pain. "What's wrong? Did you find out what's wrong with Mukai's son?" Tsunade's frown deepened even more, and Shizune, who was beside her, was surprised to see Tsunade actually lose her cool this much, and after some contemplation, Tsunade finally said, "This kid has a huge number of abnormally active but dysfunctional blood cells that are being produced continuously, which are causing this deterioration all over his body, and I might need some high-quality equipment if we want to kill those cells, but this treatment might endanger this kid. Unfortunately, I don't have any other solution, and I don't think we have plenty of time to come up with one." Mukai's heart was broken when he heard the news that his son didn't have much longer to live, and his treatment is close to impossible without killing him. And to make matters worse, this news was coming from the greatest medical ninja in the world. So, he started clenching his hands and gritting his teeth with so much force that he started bleeding from them before he asked Tsunade, "Are you sure there's no other way to heal Murata?" Tsunade could see the love and care this guy had for his son, and it was something very clear, as he went so far as to betray the strongest hidden village and put his life in danger just to get enough money to extend the life of his son. So, she ended up looking at the kid, who brought some light to her heart as she remembered the jutsu he used to heal Minato and Kushina, trying to see if he could use the same way to save Murata. And the perceptive Mukai immediately picked up on this and turned to Bakurio quickly and begged him, "Please, if you have any way to treat my son, please help him." Bakurio fell deep in thought when he heard Tsunade's diagnosis, and he couldn't help but think about an illness from his old world that had similar effects. Leukemia. And this kid probably didn't even have an image of himself when he's healthy, so it was impossible to treat him with the combination of Izanagi and Izanami like he did to Minato and Kushina. So, Bakurio ended up shaking his head, putting Mukai under more despair. "Sorry Mukai, but the forbidden jutsu I can use requires the user to at least remember a point in their lives when they were healthy, so it won't work on your son," said Bakurio, and Mukai couldn't help but fall on his knees beside his son's bed and hold his emaciated hand, feeling heartbroken, especially when his son looked at him with cloudy eyes, oblivious to what was going on around him, as he was only 3 years old, but something he understood was that he was in so much pain and would moan from time to time because of it. Shizune's eyes started tearing up, and even Tsunade didn't want to stay anymore and was ready to leave, but Bakurio's following words stopped her in her tracks. "But maybe there's a way to save him." Mukai suddenly raised his head, his eyes igniting with hope again as he quickly said, "Please tell me how and I will do anything." Tsunade and Shizune were also intrigued and couldn't wait to hear Bakuryo's thoughts, although they weren't that hopeful about them since he only started learning medical ninjutsu not long ago. However, what they didn't know is that Bakuryo knew a lot about this, more than needed because one of his grandsons in his old world had the misfortune to be affected by this disease. However, his old world was far more technologically advanced and there was a treatment for it. Remembering his little grandson, Bakuryo couldn't help but turn a little nostalgic before he dragged himself back to reality and started explaining his reasoning. Tsunade, you said that Murata's body is producing a large number of dysfunctional blood cells and they are damaging his body. And you think you need all that equipment to kill these cells, but I think you can use another way to achieve a similar effect and you will have better control over it, really. There's a less dangerous way. Mukai's heart was almost leaping out of his chest as he said this. Meanwhile, Tsunade was surprised at first hearing that she actually can use another way, but then she suddenly understood what Bakuryo was implying and she couldn't help but frown as she responded to him. I don't know how you know about the effect of my creation rebirth jutsu, but I indeed could forcefully cause those cells to divide until they die, but that won't stop this kid's body from producing more of them. Mukai started to feel his hopes getting crushed again, but Bakuryo's next words stopped it from happening. You are right, but at least next time you can use your seal to stop those cells from dividing and growing bigger, so no matter what, his normal cells will always stay dominant and the small number of dysfunctional cells won't affect the normal functions of his body like they are doing right now, and who knows, maybe in the future we will find a proper cure for it. Tsunade's eyes suddenly lit up and Shizune understood what this look meant and wanted to confirm. Lady Tsunade, is it really possible to save this poor kid? Mukai looked hopefully waiting for a positive answer. Tsunade looked thoughtfully at Bakuryo who was looking at Murata with a nostalgic look. Why does he know so much about his illness? Before she nodded her head and said, I think it's doable, and Mukai couldn't help but shoot Bakuryo a grateful look as he felt a huge weight was lifted from his heart. Then Tsunade started approaching Murata while black marks started spreading from the diamond-shaped seal on her forehead until they covered her whole face. At this point, she turned to Mukai and said, use your Byakugan and help me pinpoint the areas that contain the most dysfunctional blood cells. Mukai didn't hesitate at all as he nodded and activated his Byakugan and started directing Tsunade, and to her surprise, Mukai was extremely precise, showcasing his extreme knowledge of the human body and his great mastery of his Byakugan. Meanwhile, as this was going on, far away from Konoha in an isolated forest, there were 3 adults and 2 kids. They were of course Fugaku, Minato, and Kushina. As for the kids, they were the real body of Bakuryo as well as Naruto. Why did you bring me here? Asked Fugaku, not understanding what was going on, and Minato quickly dropped a bomb on him with a smile. We are going to unseal Kurama from Naruto. Fugaku's stoic face suddenly broke into a shocked expression as he said, Kurama? Do you mean the 9 tails? Minato, have you gone crazy? Fugaku expected many things when he was brought here, including that it might be a trap, but he never expected that they were actually going to unseal such a dangerous beast. Don't worry Fugaku, Kurama isn't as you expect, just watch the show, said Bakuryo before he nodded at Minato to start the unsealing process along with Kushina, and before long a very huge fox appeared in front of them. It was young Kurama. And Fugaku couldn't help but look at him warily and was ready to activate his Mangekyo Sharingan and control him at any moment. Ha 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 ha, I'm finally free, yelled Kurama, causing a huge shockwave in the area. Hey stupid fox, this isn't over yet, so calm down, yelled Bakuryo as Fugaku watched how Minato and Kushina started inscribing the Sun Seal and the 7 Stars Seal on Kurama one after another and was shocked to hear what their effects were. Bakuryo, are you really sure he's not a danger to the village? Asked Fugaku worriedly as he stared at Kurama nervously, which provoked a growl from the latter who was getting a free tattoo from Minato and Kushina. Grr, you Uchiha bastards won't have another chance to control me. Having some knowledge about the history of Kurama with the Uchiha and hearing him talking as if he holds a grudge against them made the worry on Fugaku's face deepen, and he was about to activate his Mangekyo Sharingan and submit this huge beast before it was too late. Bakuryo couldn't help but smile as he replied, Fugaku, don't listen to this big dumb fox, he's not as threatening as he looks or sounds, plus you think Minato would accept to releasing him if he thought he might pose a danger to Konoha. Fugaku shot Minato a look, before he recalled his loyal and gentle character and understood that he would never do something that could harm innocent people, so Fugaku ended up letting out a sigh and said, "Fine. I believe yo." But before he could complete his sentence, Kurama growled at Bakurio, who called him a dumb fox, and said, "Little brat, what did you call me? You want to get eaten?" Bakurio shot Kurama a mocking look before he said, "Eat me. Like you ate some two Kumo clowns and they ate their way out of you." Bakurio was referring to the incident when Kurama ate the brothers Kinkaku and Ginkaku, but they actually didn't resign to their fate, nor were they corroded by Kurama's chakra as they were supposed to. But instead, they took advantage of their perilous situation and started eating the inside of Kurama's stomach, and they survived like that for 2 whole weeks until they forced him to puke them out. Because of this incident, the already too terrifying brothers became even more terrifying as they became pseudo-Jinchurikis, like what happened to Sora. However, they were much stronger as they could transform into version 2 of a tailed beast and generate 6 tails, and they had complete control over it. And they were strong enough to the point that they killed the second Raikage and the second Hokage at the same time. However, no one knows how they were killed. Maybe only Kabuto, who revived them during the ninja war, knows about this. Reminded of this incident, Kurama was embarrassed and didn't know what to say, so he snorted and fell into silence while Fugaku looked at this with an unbelievable look on his face, and he only woke up from his trance when he noticed Bakurio shrugging at him and signaling with his eyes, "See. He's safe, so stop worrying." Before they watched the magical process of Minato and Kushina carving a large number of seals on Kurama until he ended up with 2 tattoos. One was a shining sun at the location of his heart and the other was 7 stars connected by thin lines at the location of his abdomen. "Ha ha ha ha, I'm finally free and no one can seal me again," yelled Kurama in pure delight, and Bakurio simply shot him an annoyed look as his hair started flying through the air from the shockwave generated by that yell and said, "Kurama, try manipulating your body following this jutsu." Bakurio transferred to Kurama a better version of the shape-shifting jutsu. This version made use of the new knowledge he gained after copying and learning the Akamichi clan's jutsus. That clan actually found a way to create a very strong yang release called the multi-size jutsu that allows the user to increase their size to the point that they can become as big as mountains. And after learning this jutsu during the war, Yuki thought of a way for Kurama to use its effect on reverse to control his size, and thanks to him being only a young half, learning this jutsu was a piece of cake, and his size started to slowly decrease slowly until he settled at the 3-meter mark, which allowed him to still tower over all of us in size. If only there's a jutsu to lower your ego, thought Bakurio before he turned around and started leaving. Well, goodbye little fox. Kurama was surprised at Bakurio leaving so suddenly, as he was expecting that he would try to ask something from him as a payment for all of this, but his expectations crumbled, and instead of feeling sad, he actually felt happy at the thought of someone not trying to take advantage of him but simply helped him because he wanted to. Minato looked at this and shook his head with a smile before he said, "Well, it's time for us to leave too. It's unfortunate I can't unseal your other half from my body or I might die." Kurama nodded at him absent-mindedly, not knowing what to say to these humans that were treating him as a person and not a tool. "I left a mark on you in case you ever want to visit us. Just contact me through your other half," said Minato before he nodded at Kushina and Fugaku, who was still reluctant to accept this but didn't say anything, to indicate to them that it was time to leave. "Goodbye Kurama. Make sure to visit us in the future and be careful. Don't be arrogant just because of the new seals," said Kushina as she carried the sleeping Naruto gently on her back and held Minato's hand ready to teleport out of here back home. Meanwhile, Fugaku, seeing this, simply let out a sigh before he flickered out of sight like a phantom, going back to his office. As Kurama witnessed them disappearing one after another, he suddenly felt empty for some reason, feeling like he had no place he belonged to in the world and didn't know where to go. Meanwhile, Bakurio was going back home while feeling slightly sad at parting ways with Kurama, but he couldn't force him to live with him if he didn't want to. After all, he was chained long enough, and this is the least he could do for him. And because they noticed this sadness, everyone decided to leave on their own. Sigh. I'm finally free to worry about my own problems. I should find Jiraiya as soon as possible to fix my energy problem. Well, I'm sure Fugaku has some information on his location, so it won't take me long to find him. Maybe I could use this time to visit that sneaky snake too. Suddenly a gust of wind passed by Bakurio, and thanks to his strong reaction speed, he noticed that it was an orange blur that materialized soon after, in front of him in the shape of a half-meter-tall nine-tailed fox instead of the previous 3-meter one which he just left behind. What kind of monster did I create? That speed is terrifying. Was he always limited by his size and weight? Thought Bakurio as he recalled the terrifying speed Kurama had just showcased, and as he was looking at him, the sound from the sonic explosion generated by Kurama finally reached his ear like a bomb exploding in the location where they had just unsealed him. What do you want, Kurama? Are you here to brag about your speed? Asked Bakurio with a slight smile on his face. Grr, brat, I heard you want to meet a sneaky guy, you can't go have fun without me. Replied Kurama while having a similar smile. Hearing this, Bakurio lowered his head before he said, let's go back home. Kurama's eyes dilated a little as he thought, home, before he nodded absent-mindedly and started following after Bakurio, unaware that he was touched as much as he was. 1 month passed after the revival of Kurama. The situation in the village was stable with so many cage-level ninja protecting it openly and secretly so it wasn't affected by the loss of Danzo. As for Bakurio, he was enjoying his relaxed life with his new family. He spent this time training his body since he simply couldn't sit around and do nothing. He also summoned many shadow clones to help him train in the various releases, which he amassed a terrifying amount of justice from each type thanks to his Sharingan. But most importantly, he wanted to learn the lightning and earth chakra transformations to make use of his terrifying reaction speed to the best of its abilities and officially master all the releases. And after this month of constant training while using many clones to help him, he was finally able to use both the lightning and earth chakra transformations, which opened up much more possibilities for his future fighting style. But he didn't spend his time only training in isolation, because he also helped Naruto and Sasuke in their training, and even helped Kurama in learning how to control his huge reserves of chakra and learn how to use it more effectively. Because right now Kurama was the same as someone who has a gun, yet he only hits people with it physically because he doesn't know how to use it, but he did know how to use it. Good luck to whoever's fighting him. And this wasn't all, because Bakurio focused some of his time on expanding his food businesses the way he originally wanted, and it went on easily with Fugaku as Hokage facilitating the logistics of it and Makoto and Kushina helping him manage it, which spared him a lot of time as his only job became creating various recipes when needed, which he did easily thanks to his cooking talent and knowledge from his previous world. Let's check out my progress, muttered Bakurio before he said inside his head. Status. Stat value, name Bakurio Uchiha, level 25, health 8620 plus 103 per minute. Chakra 20564 plus 323 per minute. Stamina 4000, attributes, STRAGI 5 EITSTASPI, 160 quadrillion 150 trillion 230 billion 251,400,790, free attribute points 145, 125 plus 20, mastery, close combat fighting. Level 87, swordsmanship. Level 74, throwing art. Level 74, sealing art. Level 23, chakra control. Level 78, meditation. Level 53, fire chakra transformation. Level 61, wind chakra transformation. Level 32, water chakra transformation. Level 36, lightning chakra transformation. Level 10, earth chakra transformation. Level 8, yin chakra transformation. Level 51, yang chakra transformation. Level 56, skills, Kekkei Genkai, eye of insight. Level 70, eye of hypnotism. Level 72, Yomi no Kuni. Level 41, Jikaninki. Level 34, Susanoo. Level 31, Space-Time, Summon. Quintuple Rashomon. Level 41, Summon. Lesser Skeleton. Level 36, Blink. Level 42, General 8, Ninjutsu, Fire 8, Wind 10. Water 9, Lightning 7, Earth 9, Yin 5, Yang 5, Taijutsu 3. Not used yet, Burning Aura. Level 35, Shurikenjutsu 2, Kenjutsu, Swift Sword Style. Level 38, Juinjutsu, Dark Touch. Level 11, Genjutsu, Fuinjutsu, Senjutsu, Abilities, Save and Load, Appraisal, Map, Tenketsu, Release, Blessing of the Elements, Bloodlines, Uchiha, 50%. Akamichi, 30%. Shadow, 35%. Talents, Body, Greedmaster, Chakra Master, Cooking, Sealing, Advanced, Hunter, Medium, not bad, but my body is approaching its natural limits. thought Bakurio. During his time in this world, he understood that talent is needed for the body to grow stronger quickly, but without a strong bloodline, sooner or later you will hit a bottleneck and stop getting stronger. What comes after that is breaking the limits, but to do it without killing yourself is easier said than done. After all, he currently only knows about the system being capable of doing such a thing safely. But that wasn't all he gained during this month. He also completed 2 quests. Quest Chakra Control 4. Reach level 75 in your chakra control. Reward: 3000 points, Blessing of the Elements. Quest Meditation 3. Reach level 50 in your meditation. Reward: 500 points, Multitask, active. Blessing of the Elements. The elements are attracted to you and you were blessed by them, which will make controlling them easier. Host gains plus 5% additional affinity to all elements. Multitask, active. This skill allows the user to manage their minds and allocate their thinking power to however many tasks they want during its activation. However, each time the user splits his mind, the computing power of those portions will also go down. Cooldown: 1h consumes spiritual energy. I think I'm ready to go meet that pervy toad. I already researched everything about him and his location, so it's time I go there, thought Bakurio as he went to his garden where a little fox was laying down and watching 2 boys fighting in front of him, or to be fair, watching Sasuke toy around with Naruto at ease thanks to his awakened Sharingan. Yo, Kurama, want to go have some fun? Said Bakurio with a smile, and he immediately noticed Kurama's ears perking up as he slowly stood up and said, "So it's finally time, huh? What took you so long, brat? I almost died from boredom." Boredom, you say? I wonder who's about to make me go bankrupt from all the food he keeps demanding while he does nothing. TCH, replied Bakurio as he remembered Kurama's first reaction when he tasted his food for the first time, and it was just like he opened the gates to hell at that point as he kept pestering him for food all the time. That's when Bakurio understood that maybe Kurama lost his size, but his stomach was still big just the same. Kurama knew that this was a losing battle since he was at fault, so he decided to change the subject and said, "So where are we going?" Naruto and Sasuke suddenly stopped fighting as they both looked at Bakurio with their eyes twinkling and said, "Bakurio, are you leaving the village?" Bakurio started sensing that trouble was approaching, so he quickly shot Kurama an angry glare before he said, "Yes, I have some business to do outside the village, but sorry I can't take you with me this time because it might take me a long time before I return." This was the truth because Bakurio was planning to learn how to control nature energy, and for that, he didn't know how long it might take him even though he has Ashura's chakra. So, he decided to better go on his own, especially since he didn't simply want to learn from the toads but he had a theory and an ambition he wanted to fulfill. "But I want to come, please," said Naruto while trying to put a puppy face, and to Bakurio's surprise, Sasuke too followed after him and started doing the same. But what got on his nerves the most wasn't these innocent kids, but the little fox behind them that was snickering at his misfortune, so Bakurio quickly sent him flying with a kick before he looked helplessly at Sasuke and Naruto until his savior arrived. It was Minato who heard the commotion of Kurama being kicked like a soccer ball and wanted to check if everything was alright, and seeing Bakurio's predicament, he couldn't help but ask, "What's going on?" "Dad, Bakurio's going out and he doesn't want to take us with him," said Naruto, trying to use his cuteness no jutsu on Minato instead since it didn't work on Bakurio, and Minato was surprised hearing that Bakurio was leaving the village, so he asked in surprise, "Bakurio, is that right?" Bakurio let out a sigh before he said, "Yes, but I believe it's going to take me a long time before I come back, so I can't take them with me." Well, I guess it's normal for him to not want to take the kids for such a long time, thought Minato before he turned to Naruto and Sasuke and said, "Naruto, Sasuke, I'm sure Bakurio would love taking you with him on a trip like he did before, but this time he must be really occupied." Naruto and Sasuke were about to complain, but Minato quickly followed by saying, "But I think you can make use of this opportunity." "How?" asked Sasuke with a puzzled look on his face, and Naruto couldn't help but nod in agreement even though he doesn't like to agree with Sasuke. "I think you two could train hard during his absence, and maybe while he's traveling outside, you two could actually surpass him," said Minato with a smile, and hearing his words multiplied by his great charisma, Naruto's and Sasuke's eyes started twinkling as they found a new goal. Inside the Hokage's office, a black-haired stoic man was currently checking all kinds of reports and files while rubbing his temples with his right hand slightly to ease the tension he was feeling but kept hidden from everybody else. This was of course Fugaku Uchiha, and he spent this whole month along with his advisor Shikaku and the third Hokage Hiruzen trying to figure out a way to deal with the matter of the spies that Bakurio so blatantly exposed to them, and they didn't find any appropriate way to deal with them because of their large number and various professions. Not to mention that even Bakurio didn't know if these were all the spies or not, and one thing he didn't want to see again was another massacre happening inside of Konoha because of carelessness, so he repeatedly told him not to make a move unless he was absolutely certain. Tap tap tap, a knocking suddenly came from the closed door of his office, startling Fugaku awake from his troubling thoughts and bringing a frown to his face as he thought, "Didn't I order to not allow anyone in?" Before he said with slight anger in his tone, "Who is it?" The Anbu that just knocked on the door felt so nervous to the point that he started sweating, and he couldn't help but look at the boy behind him with a one-tailed fox on his shoulder begging to free him from this tough situation of disobeying the Hokage's order for not allowing anyone in unless they were very important, but the boy simply ignored his pleas while saying, "Are you calling me not important?" prompting the Anbu guard to swallow hard and responded to the angry Fugaku nervously, "Fifth Hokage-sama, Bakurio Uchiha wants to talk to you." Fugaku, hearing that it was Bakurio that wanted to talk to him, couldn't but feel his anger rising as he thought, "This bastard, having the nerves to enjoy his life while dumping this trouble on my lap, you better be here for a good reason." Of course, Fugaku didn't hold a real grudge against Bakurio, especially since he knew everything Bakurio did for the village behind the scenes without trying to take any credit publicly, like bringing Tsunade back, regaining the loyalty of Mukai, and even reviving Minato and Kushina. But it was because of this same reason that he was annoyed, having someone so competent with you, yet you couldn't use them, as the most annoying thing a leader like him could possibly have, especially when they flaunt their relaxed life in front of your face every day because they live right in front of your home. As the door opened and Bakurio and the disguised Kurama entered Fugaku's office, both of them immediately noticed the dark look on Fugaku's face, and they almost burst out laughing at him, which made Fugaku have dark lines on his face as they clearly were about to start snickering at any time as they shot each other knowing looks in front of him as if he wasn't looking at them. "These two bastards," thought Fugaku while gritting his teeth before he said, "What brought you here, Bakurio?" Bakurio pretended to be hurt as he said, "Is this how you greet your dear friend?" Of course, he was trying to annoy him even more just to mess with him, and it successfully brought dark lines over Fugaku's face as he said through his gritted teeth, "Dear friend. What a dear friend you are, leaving me with all that responsibility." Bakurio rubbed the back of his head with an apologetic look on his face. "Well, I really needed a vacation, you know." This was Bakurio's true feeling, as he needed his time to readjust himself from his war mentality and better control his crazy killing intent, and it worked thanks to his constant meditation and the peaceful environments he was living in with his new family. Fugaku didn't understand the full details of the matter, but he, among many people, easily noticed the ominous aura around Bakurio slowly vanishing during this month, so he understood that it was worth it and ended up letting out a tired sigh instead of responding. "What's wrong, Fugaku? You seem very troubled," asked Bakurio, which brought a nod from Fugaku as he said, "You mentioned that one of the spies had the power to invoke negative emotions on people, making them go berserk, but even after all this time of constant searching, we couldn't find anyone who has similar powers amongst the other 4 great hidden villages, so this left our hands tied, because if we make a move now and this unknown spy ends up somehow warning the rest of spies, we will be in big trouble." Bakurio put on a thoughtful expression as he remembered that day, many people killing each other, getting manipulated through various ways, but what unsettled him the most was the people getting controlled through their emotions. Something he linked to the darkness currently hiding inside his heart, as he couldn't get rid of it without using the full power of his Jikaninki and causing his eye to go blind. "Grr, Bakurio, it might be the doing of a tailed beast," said Kurama, suddenly surprising both Fugaku and Bakurio as the former immediately asked, "What do you mean, Kurama? Do you have a suspect in mind?" Fugaku already got used to Kurama's existence and didn't find difficulty interacting with him anymore. Kurama thought for a while before he shook his and said, "No, I don't. After all, it has been a while since I talked to the other tailed beasts." Fugaku was disappointed, but Kurama's next words reignited his interest. However, only our chakra has the property to make people go berserk. This is the reason it's so rare to find a Jinchuriki that could control us, because it requires a high level of affinity with our chakra for that to happen. You mean, someone might be using the chakra of a tailed beast to cause this? Asked Fugaku, now with a very serious look on his face, but it was Bakurio who responded to him as he said, "No, that is impossible." Fugaku seemed surprised at Bakurio's conviction, and seeing that Kurama staying silent and seemed to be agreeing with him, he couldn't help but ask, "Why are you so sure?" Bakurio shrugged his shoulder and replied, "It's simple, housing a whole tailed beast and just housing some of its chakra is two whole different matters. For example, I'm currently housing enough of Kurama's chakra to allow me to use 5 tails of the first version of a Jinchuriki's transformation, and I could even house more if my body was stronger or if I allowed it to merge with my own chakra." Bakurio paused at this point before he shot Kurama, who was sitting on his shoulder, an appreciative look and said, "My point from this is that people can control a certain amount of chakra from a tailed beast without having to go berserk. However, not every tailed beast could let go of that amount of chakra that could bring people to the verge of insanity. I believe only Kurama has such strong reserves." Fugaku shot Kurama a suspicious look that made the latter growl at him, but Bakurio quickly interrupted any misunderstanding that might happen as he said, "No, it's not Kurama's chakra either, because it would be visible when its host go berserk and they start transforming. That chakra however I'm talking about is very sneaky and doesn't show on the outside." Fugaku felt confused at this point. So if it's not a tailed beast, what could it be? Kurama too was curious by this, and Bakurio's response surprised them both. "I think it's an artificial tailed beast." Fugaku suddenly stood up at this absurd idea while Kurama's eyes started flickering with a dangerous light inside of them. "That's crazy. How could such a thing be possible?" Bakurio shook his head as he replied with a serious look, "Fugaku, the second Hokage created a jutsu that could revive the dead and another that allows him to teleport, and according to my knowledge." At this point, Bakurio shot Kurama a look and said, "At some point in time during the creation of the hidden villages, the first Hokage collected all the tailed beast before he decided to distribute them, and I find it hard to believe that someone so obsessed with researching and creating all kinds of forbidden jutsu like Tobirama wouldn't try to make use of this opportunity and do some research of his own on the tailed beasts." Fugaku was speechless at how absurd yet logical this all sounded, so he couldn't help but quickly call the Anbu guard that escorted Bakurio and Kurama earlier. After this Anbu entered, he quickly knelt and said, "Yes, 5th Hokage-sama, do you need anything from me? Quickly invite Hiruzen and Tsunade to come here as soon as possible. Tell them it's something urgent," said Fugaku with a serious look that worried this Anbu. "Yes sir," he replied before he instantly flickered out to the direction of the Sarutobi compound where an old man was sipping on his tea peacefully with a little kid training in front of him. Hiruzen was enjoying his retirement peacefully inside his house, and his son Asuma even ended up adopting a kid, the same kid that used to be the pseudo-Jinchuriki of Kurama. So finding himself free, Hiruzen decided to help Asuma take care of this kid, especially since he's got his hands full doing various missions and won't be able to take care of this kid properly. But as he was watching Sora playing around while thinking that he was actually training, an Anbu that worked for Fugaku suddenly approached him, to no surprise for Hiruzen, who already sensed his presence, but he was surprised by what the Anbu said next. "3rd Hokage-sama, the 5th Hokage wants you in his office right away. He says the situation is urgent." Little Sora looked curiously at Hiruzen, whose eyes widened when he heard that there was something urgent, as he thought, could it be? Is he finally going to make a move against those spies? Feeling curious, Hiruzen turned to this Anbu guard and said, "Do you have any idea what caused this urgency?" The Anbu guard shook his head helplessly as he responded, "Unfortunately I don't know anything about it. The only thing I know is that this happened after that little kid Bakurio visited the 5th Hokage. Anyways, I need to go inform Tsunade-sama now, please excuse me." Hiruzen nodded at the Anbu and was sure now that this matter was about the spies. Even Tsunade's getting called. Maybe Bakurio brought new information. Hopefully we could solve this matter as soon as possible, thought Hiruzen before he turned to look at Sora and said with a warm smile, "Sora-chan, I need to go visit a friend and I will be back soon. Don't cause trouble, okay?" Sora looked at him innocently and nodded, prompting Hiruzen to rub his head a little before he flickered away towards the Hokage's office. Meanwhile, the Anbu left towards his next destination, which was the Senju compound where Tsunade was currently living with her apprentice Shizune. After she stayed in Konoha for a while, she couldn't just sit around and do nothing, so she took on the job as the head of Konoha's hospital, and she goes there from time to time when there are situations like Mukai's son that are hard to treat. And as she was relaxing in her backyard while having her morning drink, she sensed an Anbu enter the Senju's compound, but he seemed hesitant of approaching her directly, and if she knew his thoughts she would have smashed a hole in the floor using his head. Should I really call this terrifying monster? Thought the Anbu in worry, remembering the recent disaster that fell on the Sarutobi compound when this monster paid them a visit, but he was soon interrupted from his stupid thoughts when Tsunade suddenly appeared in front of him, startling him awake. What are you doing here? Did that brat Fugaku send you? Asked Tsunade with her hands crossed under her chest, causing it to appear like it's about to explode. Why yes, Lady Tsunade. The 5th Hokage-sama ordered me to call you and the 3rd Hokage-sama for an urgent meeting, said the Anbu nervously, fearing that he might get punched into oblivion if she gets mad. Meanwhile, Tsunade was thinking, only I and that old bastard were invited to this meeting. What could be so urgent to even make that guy Fugaku so worried? So, after contemplating for a while, she waved for the Anbu to leave before she left to the Hokage office, curious to see what would be worthy to interrupt her drink. For some reason, after Bakuryo's casual visit to Fugaku to inform him that he was going to leave for a while to find Jiraiya, he suddenly found himself dragged into the same mess he dumped on them, and right now, the previously empty office with Fugaku sitting alone inside of it now had 4 people and a fox in it. Tsunade and Hiruzen kept looking curiously at Kurama sitting lazily on Bakuryo's shoulder from the moment they entered, but after the silence kept building up for a while, Tsunade finally decided to break it and said, Bakuryo, where did you get this fox? This guy. I encounter a merchant that sells cheap foxes and I decided to get him as pet, replied Bakuryo with a smirk on his face, prompting Kurama to suddenly open his eyes wide at him and growl, You little brat, who are you calling a cheap fox? Do you want to get eaten? Tsunade was having a bad feeling about this fox and the great amount of chakra it seemed to be suppressing, and not only her, but Hiruzen was the same, because the moment he heard Kurama talk, he suddenly took 2 steps back and said with a stutter, TT, this is the 9 tails. Tsunade mouth opened wide as she looked at the cute one-tailed fox growling angrily on Bakuryo's shoulder and finding it hard to believe or even process what Hiruzen just said, but Bakuryo's next words fell like a thunderclap on both of their ears. Yes, that's right, and his name is Kurama. Stop calling him a 9-tailed fox, replied Bakuryo as if he was telling them something obvious, and seeing that Fugaku had no reaction regarding this matter made them realize that he probably already knew about this. And just as Hiruzen was about to ask more about this, Bakuryo suddenly interrupted, saying, I know you have many questions, but you can ask Fugaku about them later. You were called here regarding the matter of the spies, and I have some suspicions regarding the last unknown spy. Hiruzen did his best to hold himself back as he kept staring warily at Kurama, who ignored him completely, while Tsunade was intrigued by hearing this matter regarding spies, so she asked Bakuryo, Bakuryo, what do you mean by spies? You mean spies from other hidden villages? Bakuryo shook his head and with a helpless look said, I wish it was that simple, Tsunade. But this matter is far more complicated. Here's what's bothering us. And so Bakuryo started to explain to her and Hiruzen about the suspicion he reached thanks to Kurama's words and the minor knowledge he had from his previous world regarding a zero tail, and hearing what he said made them completely forget about Kurama. And this is why I called you both, to ask you if you have any knowledge regarding such a forbidden jutsu existing in Konoha or any of the other hidden villages, since you are from the Senju clan and must have all their knowledge, especially that of your second grandfather. As for you, Hiruzen, you are the longest ruling Hokage of Konoha, and you are even hailed as the professor thanks to all your knowledge about various jutsu, so please try to use that knowledge of yours to the best of your abilities right now. Finished Bakuryo his explanation, causing Tsunade and Hiruzen to both fall into contemplation. And after some silence, Tsunade was the first to speak, and Fugaku and Bakuryo immediately focused on her. I remember my seconder grandfather doing some research regarding the tailed beast and trying to find a way to add the attributes of their chakra to his own, making him in return gain various Kekkei Genkei if he ever achieved such a feat. However, there was no mention of an artificial tailed beast, at least not that I remember. What the hell, that guy Tobirama is really ambitious. Maybe if he didn't die young he would have actually achieved such a thing, and the level of power he would attain at that point is simply unimaginable. Thought Bakurio in admiration for the genius and innovation of Tobirama. But just as she reached this point, Hiruzen suddenly let out a sigh and said, "Who would have thought? Someone would actually be stupid enough to open the gates for such a disaster." Fugaku's eyes immediately narrowed as he said, "Hiruzen, please elaborate more," and he actually even got Kurama intrigued by his words as everyone in the room focused their attention on him. One day, I had the privilege of going on a mission along with the first and second Hokages. We received the news that someone was causing huge terror and going so far as to hold people as slaves, creating a lot of misery throughout the land of fire. At this point, everyone couldn't believe that someone would actually have the nerves to provoke the land of fire when they were at their peak with both Hashirama and Tobirama alive. But Hiruzen's next world shocked them. But once we arrived, we found that we weren't going to deal with a human. The cause of that terror was a beast, and it actually fed on the terror it caused to grow stronger. Thank you for listening guys, see you in the next part.